Hey guys, Shadowlands back with another video. Today I wanted to go over kind of a quick state of the game type video, kind of a then versus now thing. This is comparing like back in the day. We're talking like 2010 to like 2013, that kind of era, comparing it to now. Obviously there was about a 2-year time lapse where I was gone, but I have pretty vivid memories of kind of my early days in Combat Arms. Actually, I wouldn't even call that early. I'd just call that kind of when I really loved Combat Arms. So I also had some really big videos around the time that the reboot update came out way back in the day. I don't even know how many of you guys even remember that. That was a real big deal back then. But I've got some good vivid memories back then, and I want to compare that to what I see now in the game. I'm going to do a little bit of analysis, mostly over CA Classic, but I will be throwing in some stuff on CA Reloaded in there. And just as part of a throwback, obviously this gameplay is over Cabin Fever. I'm not even sure how many of you guys remember this, but this was a really classic game mode that I really, really loved, and I was just feeling like dicking around with it. Honestly, we didn't even win. I just had a great time playing it, so kind of a throwback for me, but it was a good time. Anyway, let's get into today's topic. So I want to kind of bring back some memories of what the game was like, say like 2009, 2010, all the way kind of through 2012. You got to remember, first there were huge problems with hacking. I know people complained about hacking all the way from the dawn of Combat Arms into, well, still today. We still see people complaining about it all the time. But you got to remember, compared to back then, this is nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Back in between 2009 2012, we had a solid year. In 2011, where not a single hack-fixing patch was released. We had barely any new content that year at all. And in fact, I think this is kind of what started the decline in a very slow way at first, but it definitely gave people a really bad taste in their mouth when talking about Nexon. When you think about Combat Arms and Nexon, you'd be like, oh, that's the game that they just like don't update anymore, right? And everyone's just a hacker. And if you called someone a hacker and they were playing super well, there was probably a 50% chance you were actually right. And then also at the end of 2012, I believe it was 2012, could have been 11, but I think it was 2012, we had the Christmas where the first Nextmas came out, where every single NX rare was sold for permanent. And that's where a lot of people got the Black Magnum, and I was super sad because I'd gotten it legitimately permanent out of a Black High-Sec case, and oh man, I felt so bad after that because I couldn't brag about that anymore, but that's not the point. The point is, obviously, NX rares are sold, hyper-inflated the market, and it just kind of made the game not so fun anymore, because if you couldn't spend money on the game and you couldn't get these super OP weapons like everybody else, well, you were just kind of screwed out of luck when you were playing competitive stuff like Clan Wars. It just was a lot less fun. Although, to some degree, it was cool to run around with your favorite weapons, but I think that happened in the game way too early. Like, if that happened now, it wouldn't really be a big deal. Like, actually, it might even bring back some players if they'd just not done that, or they'd only sold them for limited times, and then maybe sold, like, renewal kits, because getting a permanent out of all that would have been much, much harder than just spending $40 and getting a Black Magnum. I remember the prices were anywhere between $30 and $50 for a permanent, which obviously is a lot of money, but it's also at the price point where a lot of players could still go and afford that, especially if they were already paying for NX. However, there's also some really good things that happened back then. Like I mentioned earlier, the Combat Arms reboot update, it was actually one of my biggest videos of all time, was a fantastic update. It equalized a lot of the prices on the store, made things more fair to buy, so like you wouldn't have a basic R870 being like $1 million frickin' dollars, which is the same price as an MSR sniper rifle. So it very much equalized the prices, made things very easy to get a hold of. That was obviously a terrible example, but that's kind of what was going on. Prices were not very equal, didn't feel like you were paying fair prices for everything individually. So that was kind of a big thing that got fixed, got a lot of people's attention. Not to mention, it made a lot of more things just plain out available for rent on the store, and they also made it so you could buy perms again. If you guys don't remember, for a year before the reboot update, it was actually closer to like 8 or 9 months, but for quite a while before the update, permanents had been removed from the store. You couldn't even buy them with NX. You had to just buy them temporarily. And I think the longest duration you could buy most things was like 30 days. That was their attempt, that was Nexon's attempt to bring balance to the game and to try to remove perms from the market and try to remove rare weapons from the market to try to lower the game out. This happened after the 2012's Christmas thing, so this was kind of their way of realizing, oh crap, we messed up. We completely overinflated the market. How can we deregulate it? And that was their idea of, okay, we can try to remove some of the stuff from the market by not making them for sale anymore. And that actually just pissed everybody else off, because then it made it even more impossible to catch up to players who had already gotten and gotten all that stuff. I said that backwards. Following the reboot update, though, lots of new maps were released, and they began experimenting with new game modes and actually adding maps and kind of, it's hard to call it a new game mode, but that's when we got the new new fire team map where you could go out on the cruise ship and try to do the survival thing. I actually loved that game mode. That was one of my absolute favorite things to do. I think it was called like Dead Water or something like that. Tons of fun. And they started releasing a lot of new maps too, which was just fantastic. So I think overall the reboot was like 80% awesome and 20% not awesome. But that was really great. And the 20% of the not awesome is actually very controversial in itself. They began releasing lots of gun skins with different stats. That's around the time that the DSR Snake set and the Maxes set and all that started going on sale. It was not too long after that update. That was obviously a lot more controversial, so some people had very strong opinions like, yay, this is cool, I can buy an entire set of weapons and have some cool weapons for permanent. And other people were like, oh crap, more OP crap that's now getting crammed into the game. So that was a little bit of a... It was a sad day for some people, but honestly, I thought it was pretty cool. The Snake set is by far my favorite. Also, another great thing to remember about old Combat Arms is the community was wicked strong. I don't know how many of you guys would even remember these names, but Community Ban List, also known as CBL. We have LCA, that was legit Combat Arms, and it kind of came after CBL on the dying edge of CBL because they were kind of losing credibility due to some things with the administrators on CBL. So LCA came along. Lots of clans had websites, including Tears of Fear, and TeamSpeak 3 and voice chat servers, all that stuff. The community was incredibly strong. There were tons of YouTube content creators out there. We had so many different montage makers, even though quite a few of them were exploited as hackers or shown as hackers. The videos were still pretty cool, and they got a lot of views. Very, very few of those YouTubers still remain. I mean, UCD obviously does. Royco still posts some vids and stuff like that, but we haven't seen anything from Arctic Dropshot. Obviously, he quit a while back, and I have not been keeping up to date with Sniff and a lot of the old buds, so that has been a different story altogether. But long story short, clans were also super active. You saw tons of clan wars going on at all times. Recruitment rooms were absolutely everywhere. You could jump into a clan within a day of playing, even if you were a brand new player. It was super easy to get involved and make a lot of friends in the game and just generally have a good time. But a lot of people also took the game way too seriously, especially as a clan leader and watching my clan admins. If I could go back and change one thing, I would try to be a little more casual about it. Like, I understand Tears of Fear was a big clan, and we had a reputation to upkeep, but I wish we could have been slightly more casual looking back on it. And I was definitely not the only one that was, like, had that big of an issue. I know a lot of people just took the game too seriously, and they definitely still do, especially a lot of the older players. Like, kind of the ones that really do come from the 2009 to 2012 era, still take the game really, really, really seriously. And it's fun to have, like, to be serious about a game, but when you go crazy with it, that's a commentary for another time. The point is, a lot of people take the game way too seriously. And, of course, the prices of everything were still terribly, terribly overinflated, so that was still kind of an issue from back then. But now let's take a look at what's going on in CA nowadays, because that's obviously where all of us are. We're sitting here in the present. No one's watching my videos from 5 years ago anyway. The playing field, as I've said many times, has been leveled in Combat Arms Classic, and it's brought back a lot of old content that people really love, like this Cabin Fever gameplay. So there's that. But it's very, very friendly to new players, which I was very pleased to see. Obviously, when they set back everyone's permanents in their inventories and didn't carry those over, it makes the game very, very friendly to new players. And personally, I am totally for the inventory removal and kind of the transfer process. I think they did that pretty well, personally. So I'm very glad that we now have a version of Combat Arms that was in its prime that is also very accessible to new players. So I think that's fantastic. Obviously, we're not having a huge influx of players, but it's great to see that they are taking that head nod towards them, and the game is a lot more balanced than it could possibly have come out if they just transferred everyone's perms over. So, that being said, there's obviously a lot of new content to talk about and discuss between the discrepancies with Reloaded and Classic, and so, obviously, and VALOFE, I should actually mention that, VALOFE is giving us a lot to discuss as well. They're updating their website fairly frequently, and we're actually seeing some evolution to the website itself, some slightly better graphics on the website, some better UI, so that's actually pretty cool too. It's basically a clean slate for a new company to do a good job or fuck up horribly, so we gotta hope that obviously the latter does not happen. We don't want them to totally screw up, but we're glad to have a clean slate, and we're hoping that they'll do a good job. That's another commentary for another time, but it is a clean slate. That's what I wanted to throw out there, so we have that kind of sitting on our shoulders right now. And there's likely some reason that the prices we see in the store are kind of a remnant of what Nexon had before, where prices are still really overinflated. I think if they immediately drop the prices on everything to be really, really cheap, they might have a little bit of a rebound from that whole Nextmas sale a long time ago, where they don't just want to overinflate immediately for people who are already buying into the game. That would be less friendly to new players. So I think that at least for the time being, keeping the prices slightly higher and then dropping them over time as they start to build up a player base and sort of accept all the new players that they're gonna get, then they can drop the prices and kind of make it, you know, I wouldn't say less friendly for new players, although that would be a consequence. It's just, it would be better for everybody if they just put off dropping the prices for a little while. And when I say a little while, I mean maybe 4 to 5 months. I don't mean indefinitely for like a year or two. So give it a little bit of time, prices could drop, and I think that would be good. I'm obviously not making any predictions here. That actually may be a great topic for another time, but that will be something we talk about later. Another thing that I'd like to point out today is that we have lots of uncertainty. I kind of mentioned and hinted at this before, but the community for Combat Arms is very, very niche. We're kind of unsure of what the company's going to do, and the game is kind of surviving via older players right now. The new player influx is small, but we want to make sure that even the small people that we get are sucked into the game and enjoy it and really want to play it with us, and we need to make sure that the older players get along well with them. So, given that the game is currently surviving based on older players, this is super important, and it's kind of up to us. It's like our duty to make sure that the new players, the new kids, are having fun. It's kind of like when you invite a new kid to the playground for the first time. You want to make sure they're having a good time, be nice to them, and have a good time. It's a good time to make new friends anyway, so it's just difficult right now. That's what it is. It's difficult to get new blood into the game, but anyway, let's keep moving. The game's core mechanics. Now, this is something I really wanted to talk about. Recoil recovery, jump and crouch mechanics, they all seem to be more or less back to what they were, which is really nice. Recoil recovery got changed a lot with the Reloaded update. It got slowed down with a bunch of weapons, making things a little bit harder to use in some instances, and especially with sniper rifles where you obviously don't have a reticle. I think those were the most heavily affected, basically nerfing those. I wouldn't say into the ground or anything. It wasn't crazy, but it was noticeable, especially on certain weapons like the L9 series and the L11 series, but that's kind of how I see it. The game plays much more like earlier Counter-Strike now, so we're talking CS Source. It definitely plays a lot like that. I wouldn't quite go so far back as to say CS 1.6, but it definitely plays like Counter-Strike Source a little bit more, whereas we can see that Reloaded was more going in the path of CSGO, which is a totally different thing. I'm talking minus the acceleration mechanics and the running, but that's a topic for another time. I'll probably do a physics video on that at some point. They didn't seem to re-implement abilities, which I don't know whether I like or not. To be honest, I know they were bugged to all hell, like hucking a grenade across Kill Creek. That was a little bit broken, but it was fun. So I don't know how I feel yet about not having those. I also like the ability to kill an enemy and have them have a high chance to drop a recovery kit. I thought that was kind of neat, but that also obviously enables spawn campers. So obviously there's good reasons and bad reasons to have those. I'm going to let the game developers make that call, but I could be happy either way. Personally, I think it'd be cool to at least have servers where your abilities were enabled, but that's obviously a lot to ask for the time being. And for some reason, they brought back the Synapse Scrambler. Not entirely sure I'm on board with that, but that's a whole interesting topic in itself. Balancing is definitely in order, but without people spending money on the game, it's not too bad yet when you don't have whales coming in and just dropping tons, thousands, hundreds, whatever, dollars just on the game to buy all the best weapons right off the bat. With people not doing that yet, either due to trust issues with Nexon carrying over to VALOFE, or the fact that it's a new game, or that people are just salty that their stuff didn't come over from Reloaded back to Classic. It's good that people aren't just dumping money into the game just yet. It gives everyone a fair chance, and the game doesn't feel totally unbalanced yet, but we will definitely need some balancing down the road, so it's going to be in order, and hopefully VALOFE picks up on that ball. Last couple of things I wanted to touch on. Mostly to do with Combat Arms Reloaded now. It's just as overinflated as it's always been. I mean, that shouldn't be shocking to anybody. Everyone has OP weapons. That's totally unsurprising. That didn't change when they carried over from Nexon to VALOFE. The clan system is slightly more functional than in Classic, I guess. You have more options to customize your clan, and obviously clans are bigger and are still around in Reloaded, whereas they have to be built from scratch in Classic, which is a totally different issue. The split between the games, however, seems to have a similar effect as to when we saw the server splits from when it was just North America and Europe, when they split the servers to North America, Europe, Brazil, Mexico, all these other servers. I don't know if there might have been an Australian server. I think there was a South Korea server at some point. Long story short, they split the servers, and that really split the player base. It did help with lag, but I don't think it overall helped with the community being strong and being together and being unified. So when that happened a while back, all it did was dilute the player base, and I think that has somewhat happened here, although not to super big of an extent, because it still allows intercontinental players to play together, which is really nice. So it's just the same concept of fewer people to play with, fewer games, less variety, smaller clans, less interesting game, and people leave over time because there's no one to play with. So diluting your player base is not good in general. But that being said, just to summarize, Combat Arms Reloaded, and in the present state, still kind of sucks ass in my opinion, but it does have the potential to be really fantastic, and it's going to depend entirely on what VALOFE does. I'm keeping a very close eye on what they're doing over the next few weeks and months, and hopefully we can start to get some nitpick ideas of what they're planning on doing with the game in the future, as well as just right now. We want to see what they're doing, if they have any fun events planned. Obviously, I'm talking about stuff like Spiders vs. Scorpions, Christmas and holiday events, summer events, Nexon always did a pretty good job of running events, actually, and I'm hoping that VALOFE can pick up that basketball and run with it for a little ways, so we'll have to see what the future has to show for all of us. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I know this was a bit of a long video. Thank you for sticking with me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Shadowlance out.